History often turns not on speeches or declarations, but on quiet mornings when incomplete reports cross a desk and unsettle assumptions that once felt unbreakable. On June 4, 1942, far from the smoke and fire of the Pacific, a distant naval battle began to ripple through the heart of Nazi Germany's command structure. What reached Berlin that day was not yet catastrophe, but it was something far more dangerous: uncertainty. And for a regime that had built its entire global strategy on rigid assumptions, uncertainty was the first crack in the foundation. At 9 a.m. on June 4, 1942, inside the operations wing of the Reich Chancellery in Berlin, Adolf Hitler begins his morning routine. Overnight military summaries from across occupied Europe and the eastern battlefields lie before him. As expected, the Eastern Front commands most of the attention. Yet among the documents is a brief intelligence note from far beyond Europe, an update from the Pacific. Filtered through German naval attaches and intercepted communications, the report references a Japanese naval operation near a remote coral atoll called Midway, northwest of Hawaii. According to the message, Imperial Japanese forces have made contact with American carrier units. The language is measured, cautious, deliberately restrained. There is no mention of victory or defeat, only engagement, losses, and uncertainty. 4 months, German leadership had treated Japanese naval supremacy as a given. The shock of Pearl Harbor in December 1941 had reinforced that belief. Even 4 months later, Berlin's intelligence estimates assumed that America's carrier fleet had been crippled and that Japan held uncontested initiative across the Pacific. That assumption had shaped German grand strategy. If Japan dominated one ocean, the United States would remain overstretched, divided between hemispheres, slow to concentrate power against Europe. Within the German High Command, the first reports from Midway provoke little concern. The tone is technical, unemotional, and consistent with Japanese communications doctrine. Aircraft losses are referenced without totals. Carrier movements are described without confirmation of damage. The battle is portrayed as ongoing. At this stage, no one in Berlin speaks of disaster. What draws quiet notice instead is what is missing: the confident declaration of decisive Japanese success that normally follows major engagements. Wilhelm Keitel, chief of the Armed Forces High Command, receives the same summary shortly after Hitler. His attention that morning has been fixed on the Eastern Front, where preparations for a renewed summer offensive are underway. Compared to the looming land war against the Soviet Union, Midway appears peripheral. In Keitel's view, Germany's fate will be decided on the plains of the East. The Pacific remains Japan's responsibility. Yet even in these early hours, something feels different. Japanese communications arrive more slowly than usual. Claims are narrower. Certainty, so often present in earlier reports, is absent. By midday, additional intercepts and diplomatic cables reach Berlin. Rather than clarify the situation, they deepen the ambiguity. One report mentions heavy Japanese aircraft losses. Another suggests that American carriers were not caught off guard as they had been at Pearl Harbor, but were already at sea, maneuvering, counterattacking. That detail carries weight. It implies preparation, intelligence penetration, and operational competence on the American side. For German planners accustomed to dismissing American military effectiveness, it is an unwelcome signal. Alfred Jodl, head of operations, studies the incoming material with increasing concern. Unlike many of his peers, Jodl has long argued that the United States should not be underestimated. He views war as a system where logistics, intelligence, and momentum matter as much as individual battles. To him, the absence of clear Japanese success is more troubling than confirmed losses would have been. In modern warfare, silence often means damage control. Jodl begins requesting follow-up reports, especially regarding carrier damage. None arrive with reassurance. As the afternoon wears on, internal briefings subtly change their tone. The battle is now described as costly. American resistance is labeled unexpectedly strong. Japanese objectives are framed as contested rather than achieved. Still, no formal admission of defeat appears. This restraint reflects both genuine uncertainty and Japanese military culture, which prioritizes authority and confidence, especially in communications with allies. German officers recognize this pattern. More importantly, they recognize what is absent. Within Hitler's immediate circle, discussion remains limited. Hitler himself shows little outward reaction. He is known for dismissing unfavorable news until it becomes unavoidable. The Pacific lies far beyond his direct control, yet its implications are unmistakable. If American carriers remain operational, then the United States still possesses offensive reach. If Japan has failed to destroy them, then American industry has time to mobilize, expand, and strike back. By early evening, a more detailed naval intelligence assessment reaches Berlin. It suggests that at least one Japanese carrier has been severely damaged, possibly sunk. The report is marked unconfirmed. No numbers are attached. Even so, its implications are grave. Carrier warfare is not about individual ships. It is about sea control and power projection. The loss of a carrier is not a tactical setback. It is a strategic rupture. That night, Karl Donitz reviews the information. As commander of Germany's submarine arm, he has long identified American shipbuilding capacity as the ultimate threat. Submarine warfare depends on time and attrition. If the United States retains its carriers and accelerates production, then time no longer favors Germany. Midway, even without full clarity, suggests that American naval leadership is adapting faster than expected. By the end of June 4th, no formal conclusions are issued in Berlin. No statements are made. No strategies are publicly adjusted. But among senior officers, a quiet reassessment has begun. The war they had envisioned, Japan dominating the Pacific while Germany defeats the Soviet Union before American power fully mobilizes, now contains a dangerous unknown. What remains unspoken that night is the larger implication. If American carriers have survived and inflicted serious losses, then the United States is not merely present in the war, it is shaping it. 2 days later, uncertainty gives way to confirmation. A consolidated intelligence report reaches the highest levels of German command. 4 Japanese fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, have been destroyed near Midway. Hundreds of veteran pilots and deck crews are gone. The American carriers involved remain operational. The engagement is no longer described as contested. It is identified as a decisive Japanese defeat. Hitler receives the report during a scheduled military conference. The setting is familiar. Senior commanders seated around a long table, maps of the Eastern Front covering the walls. The Pacific update is a secondary agenda item, but its content immediately disrupts the room. Hitler listens without interruption. His reaction is restrained, but his posture changes. His questions focus not on Japan's losses, but on American capacity. How many carriers were involved? How quickly can replacements be built? Is this outcome coincidence or competence? For Hitler, Midway's true significance lies not in the Pacific, but in what it reveals about the United States. His worldview has long rested on the belief that America is industrially powerful but strategically slow, politically divided, and culturally unprepared for sustained war. Pearl Harbor seemed to confirm that belief. Midway shatters it. The battle demonstrates intelligence penetration, rapid decision-making, and coordinated carrier operations under pressure, traits of a capable, learning opponent. Wilhelm Keitel notices the shift immediately. Discussion moves away from Japanese mistakes and toward American potential. This is an uncomfortable turn. German strategy has depended on time to defeat the Soviet Union, to exhaust Britain, to limit American involvement. Midway suggests that time is no longer neutral. Jodl addresses the implications directly. Japan has lost not only ships, but irreplaceable personnel. Carrier warfare depends on experienced air crews and deck officers, assets that cannot be replaced quickly. The United States, by contrast, has lost none of comparable value. Its industrial expansion is already underway. Shipyards on both coasts are operating at unprecedented pace. Jodl does not speculate. He presents figures, construction timelines, production rates, training pipelines. The contrast is unmistakable. Hitler responds defensively. He criticizes Japanese planning and frames the loss as a tactical failure rather than a systemic one. He insists that Europe remains decisive, and that Japan's role is to distract America, not defeat it outright. Yet even as he speaks, the balance he describes is eroding. Japan was expected to eliminate American naval power, not merely delay it. Donitz listens closely. His concern is narrower but no less serious. Submarine warfare depends on assumptions about escort availability, replacement rates, and naval priorities. If American carriers survive and production accelerates, convoy protection will improve. Losses once considered acceptable will no longer be sustainable. Industrial war favors the side that can absorb damage without collapse. Midway suggests that America can. Within German naval planning offices, a quiet change takes place. The assumption of permanent Japanese dominance in the Pacific disappears from internal assessments. The war there is now described as dynamic, not settled. This shift in language signals recognition. American forces are not merely recovering, they are adapting. For Hitler, the psychological impact comes more slowly, but it runs deep. He has always believed that ideological will can overcome material disadvantage. Midway contradicts that belief. It demonstrates that organization, intelligence, and production can reverse early defeat. The United States entered the war late, but it did not enter unprepared. And by June 1942, its navy had already learned how to fight back. As the conference draws to a close, no orders are issued in response to Midway. There is nothing Germany can directly alter in the Pacific theater. Yet something far more consequential has occurred. The sense of predictability, the belief that the war was unfolding along a known and manageable path, has quietly collapsed. The conflict is no longer progressing according to the sequence Berlin once assumed inevitable. The adversary Adolf Hitler had long dismissed as divided, decadent, and strategically clumsy has revealed discipline, preparation, and resolve. That realization does not trigger panic, but it unsettles the foundations of German planning. That evening, internal memoranda circulate among senior officers. The language is restrained and technical. No one speaks of defeat. No one predicts catastrophe. But timelines are adjusted. Estimates are extended. Risk, once minimized, is now acknowledged. These documents are not meant for public consumption. They are written for men who understand precisely what has changed without needing it stated outright. Midway has not altered the immediate realities of Europe. Soviet armies still hold the Eastern Front. British bombers continue to strike German cities. Yet the strategic horizon has shifted. The United States has emerged not merely as a supplier or distant participant, but as an active and capable belligerent. The war Germany intended to conclude through speed, shock, and initiative is evolving into a contest of endurance. And endurance, more than ideology, courage, or belief, will determine which powers remain standing when momentum alone is no longer enough. In the weeks that follow, the internal language of Germany's senior command changes in subtle but unmistakable ways. Publicly, confidence remains absolute. Official statements continue to promise inevitable victory. Privately, however, assessments grow sharper and more sober. Midway becomes a reference point in planning discussions, not because of its geography, but because of what it reveals about the enemy Germany now confronts. Alfred Jodl records his concerns in restricted operational memoranda circulated only among the highest levels of command. He does not dwell on Japanese failure. Instead, he focuses on the American response. U.S. carrier forces were not merely present, they were positioned correctly. Intelligence had functioned. Command discipline held. Naval aviation executed coordinated strikes under intense pressure and achieved decisive results within a narrow window. To Jodl, this indicates not chance but adaptation. He describes an enemy capable of learning rapidly and correcting errors in real time. This is not framed as a future threat. It is defined as an existing condition. Wilhelm Keitel's remarks during staff conferences are more cautious, but they reveal the same understanding. He presses for accelerated operations in the East, arguing that Germany must achieve decisive outcomes before American power can be fully brought to bear. The urgency in his tone reflects a growing consensus. Time is no longer elastic. Midway has compressed it. Each unresolved month now strengthens the enemy. Within naval command circles, Karl Donitz becomes increasingly direct. He argues that the United States has demonstrated the central advantage of an industrial power operating far from its homeland, the ability to absorb losses without strategic paralysis. Submarine warfare, he warns, can only succeed if American production can be overwhelmed. Privately, he acknowledges that this is improbable. Shipbuilding figures rise steadily. Escort fleets expand. Training programs accelerate. Midway reinforces his belief that the United States is preparing for a war measured not in campaigns but in years. These discussions are not emotional in tone, but they are unmistakably anxious in substance. German commanders no longer debate whether the United States can fight effectively. They debate how long Germany can delay the inevitable concentration of American power in Europe. This marks a psychological turning point. The enemy is no longer abstract or underestimated. It is defined, measured, and increasingly respected. Hitler's presence complicates every conversation. In formal meetings, he continues to express confidence in Germany's destiny, dismissing concerns about American involvement as exaggerated. He attributes Midway to Japanese miscalculation rather than American competence. Yet his behavior tells a different story. He interrupts briefings more frequently. He demands detailed production figures. He challenges assumptions that once went unquestioned. His need for control intensifies as certainty erodes. There is no unified response among the generals. Some continue to believe that a decisive victory in the East will render American power irrelevant. Others doubt this quietly, voicing concerns only in restricted settings. What unites them is recognition. Germany is now engaged in a global war against an opponent with unmatched resources and proven adaptability. Midway becomes shorthand for that reality. The most revealing insights do not appear in formal conferences, but in marginal notes, after-action reviews, and private correspondence. These documents strip away ideology and assess the situation professionally. They acknowledge that Japan's carrier losses are irreplaceable in the near term. They recognize that American training pipelines are expanding faster than expected. They accept that the technological gap is narrowing, not widening. No one speaks of surrender. No one predicts defeat openly. Yet phrases about unfavorable ratios, extended timelines, and cumulative disadvantage recur with increasing frequency. These are the words of men who understand that control is slipping. Midway also alters how German planners view the Axis alliance itself. The assumption of parallel success gives way to concern over divergent capacity. Japan's losses expose the risk of relying on an ally whose industrial base cannot match its opponents. The war is no longer synchronized. It is fragmented, uneven, and increasingly difficult to manage. As summer advances, internal assessments grow darker. The Eastern Front consumes resources at an unsustainable rate. Air defenses strain under relentless bombing. Submarine losses mount. Midway does not create these pressures, but it clarifies their trajectory. It confirms that the enemy is not only resisting but improving. Inside German planning offices, Midway is no longer treated as an isolated naval defeat. It is understood as evidence of a structural imbalance that cannot be corrected. Strategic memoranda drafted in the summer of 1942 reflect a new reality. The focus shifts from achieving victory to managing risk, delaying collapse, and extracting maximum effect from diminishing resources. Time, once Germany's ally, is now its adversary. Jodl reviews production figures alongside operational forecasts. The numbers are precise and unforgiving. American aircraft output continues to rise. Shipyards expand capacity beyond replacement. Training systems scale with industrial growth. These trends are measurable, not speculative. Even flawless execution, he recognizes, cannot close the gap. Modern war is decided by sustained output as much as by tactical brilliance. Midway demonstrates that the United States can absorb early losses and emerge stronger. Donitz presses for intensified submarine warfare, the last remaining lever available. He argues that the Atlantic remains the decisive theater where American power might still be disrupted. Yet even he acknowledges the limits. Escort technology improves. Air coverage expands. Loss ratios worsen month by month. Midway reinforces his fear that the United States will not be delayed long enough to matter. Keitel urges acceleration everywhere, greater risk, faster offensives. Only decisive action, he believes, can prevent the convergence of American, British, and Soviet power. Reality resists. Logistics strain. Fuel shortages deepen. Manpower losses accumulate. The system is already stretched to its limits. Midway removes the illusion that initiative alone can overcome structural weakness. Hitler responds with increasing rigidity. He rejects proposals implying contraction or prioritization. He insists that willpower can offset material disadvantage. Yet his directives grow more detailed and less flexible, signs not of confidence but of pressure. He senses that the margin for error has vanished. Midway has shown that the enemy does not need superiority everywhere. It needs only to endure. Strategic discussions increasingly frame the war as cumulative. Each loss compounds the next. Each delay strengthens the enemy. Midway is identified as an irreversible threshold, the point at which American power shifts from recovery to expansion. The idea of keeping the United States divided between oceans has failed. The question is no longer if American strength will concentrate, but when. By late 1942, Midway disappears from public German discourse. It is absent from speeches, newspapers, and official summaries. It survives only in internal documents and private understanding. Hitler continues to speak of victory. His rhetoric grows more absolute as options narrow. Loyalty and sacrifice are demanded. Yet his decisions reflect constraint rather than opportunity. Among senior officers, knowledge hardens into resignation. Planning continues. Orders are obeyed. But belief erodes beneath discipline. They are no longer fighting for victory as once defined, but to postpone an outcome they increasingly understand. Midway did not end the war. It revealed its true nature. A conflict decided not by belief or declaration, but by capacity, adaptation, and time.